Hi, my name is Tim, and welcome to ADHD Mastery. ADHD Mastery is the way where you can transform your ADHD into a superpower. Now, you might think, superpower, isn't ADHD a disability? Well, that's how a big part of the world seems to look at it, yes, and that's how I used to look at it as well, but not anymore. Let me tell you my story. So, my entire life, I've had trouble focusing. I've had low energy, low motivation. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't work properly, study properly. The only thing that seemed to catch my attention was playing video games. So, for the longest time, I thought that I was disabled in some way. And it was only when I turned 23, which is 4 years ago, that I was actually diagnosed with ADHD. Now, at the time, I thought, great, now I finally know what it is that I have. And with this new information, I can hopefully deal with it better so that I can finally start living my life properly. So I started medication. And what that did was pretty much numb my brain. I was taking Adderall at the time, and I experienced, yes, it did somewhat allow me to focus a bit better because I wasn't really as easily distracted as before. But it also turned me into some sort of zombie. I wasn't really myself anymore. I really felt that in social interactions. And people noticed that too. So at that point, it felt like a trade-off. Get a marginal improvement in working at the cost of losing my own personality, which didn't really seem worth it. So I decided to go without medication. And that's when I came on the path of self-development. Now, I tried a lot of different things, but one of the things that really helped me, that made a big change for me, was going into therapy. And that is something that's often not talked about in self-development. But having someone, a professional you can talk to about what is going on, gives you more perspective than you would otherwise have. If you're not able to reflect upon yourself, well, it can be very valuable to have someone to talk to. And from therapy, I got a new perspective on ADHD. I started looking at it in the same way as Dr. Gabor Mate looks at it, which is that ADHD is essentially a scrambled brain. It is the result of both environmental factors and genetics, a combination of both. Now, in the first few years of our lives, our brains will develop the most. So all the influences on our brain will be incredibly impactful. Now, for children who grow up in certain environments where they're not properly given attention by their parents, or they aren't able to play, or there's something else that is inhibiting them from developing properly, as a result can turn out to get ADHD. Now, with this new information in mind, I learned how to somewhat alleviate my ADHD symptoms because I realized there is some sort of trauma at the base of my ADHD. And that's what Gabor Mate calls it. Now, with trauma, he doesn't necessarily mean being abused, but he means some sort of experience that I couldn't really work through very well, that I couldn't really place very well, that led to some coping mechanisms. And a very common coping mechanism for children is to zone out, right? And that's also one of the most prevalent symptoms amongst people with ADHD. So you can see the connection there. Now, what I learned is that in moments where I get triggered, and this is the case for everyone, when we get triggered by something in our environment, it does something with us internally, right? We have an internal response. So someone might say something that offends you, and as a result, you feel offended, and there's some anger there, or some disappointment, or some sadness, or whatever there is, right? Now, people with ADHD are a bit more susceptible to these influences. That's why we can sometimes be very affected by something small that might not hurt other people as much. What I learned to do to deal with this was what I call inner work. And inner work essentially is addressing the thing that occurs within you as soon as you get triggered, to embrace that feeling and be able to let that go. And I will teach you this technique in a later video. But to continue with my story, I had learned this, and it in some way actually improved my focus, and I was able to deal with my ADHD a bit better. But it is only until very recently where I made one of the most transformational, one of the biggest steps in my life thus far, which was quitting two things that I had no idea were disabling me in so many ways, which were video games and pornography. Now, I didn't see myself as a heavy pornography user. I saw it as actually something pretty normal. Like, everyone watches porn, right? It's a normal thing, at least for guys, to do. Most of my friends watch it. So I never thought of it as a problem until I started watching Hamza, a YouTube influencer, and Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist, who has an amazing podcast where he talks about all sorts of things, usually related to dopamine. And he also talked about the dangers of porn, what effects it has on your brain. And that's when I started trying to go without it. And the results were remarkable. And by the way, I can combine this with quitting video games. Because both, to some extent, what they did to me was they produced a sort of high that for a moment allowed me to forget about everything else in the world and just enjoy that. But would always be followed with a low. And that would not be just a small low, that would be a deep low. And Huberman calls that dropping below baseline dopamine. Dopamine being the happiness hormone that indicates kind of your state of well-being, so to speak. So the more dopamine you have, the better you feel. The less you have, the worse you feel. And after you indulge in something that produces a lot of dopamine, you will fall below where you were before you used it. And that might last quite a while. For people with ADHD, this can be even more intense. Now, pornography might not be your issue. It might also not be video games. It might be television. It could even be reading books, no matter what it is. The thing is, you got to identify for yourself what that thing is. And then something needs to happen that most people are unable to do because they are unaware of it. You got to have the right motivation to quit. You see, there are two different motivations to quit. The first one is fear-driven, and the second one is love-driven. So what do I mean by this? Now, a fear-driven motivation is something that most people will use to stop doing something that they think is not good for them. For instance, if someone is overweight and they want to stop eating so many sweets, they will have the fear-driven motivation that if they keep on eating so many sweets, they will become more overweight, they will never become lean, they'll never have the body that they really want. On the other hand, you have love-driven motivation. Love-driven motivation, which I denote with the term self-love, which does not refer to some sort of narcissistic belief about oneself, but is all about embracing yourself, being happy with who you are, embracing your life, and truly wanting the best for yourself. So a love-driven motivation would be something like this. I will start exercising more and eating healthier because I value my body. I value my health. I value my well-being. Those are values of mine. And because I hold those values so dear, I will do what I need to do to stay healthy. And that is the kind of motivation that you need. The kind of motivation that allows you to actually quit an addicting behavior. So, this is the first step. Become aware of what your addictions are, because everyone has addictions. Everyone. But figuring out which ones they are and being able to go without them for a while is going to show the impact that they had on your life. Now, you might quit something that didn't have that profound of an impact, but you might also be able to quit something that had an immense impact on your life. So to do that, you need the love-driven motivation. And I will help you to get that motivation, because that motivation results from doing inner work. And in the next video, I will teach you exactly how to do inner work so that you can start and quitting the things that are not good for you and living a life that is. My name is Tim. I'm a holistic coach for people with ADHD. And I believe that we can all turn our ADHD into a superpower that drives us towards our goals instead of holding us back from achieving them. I will see you in the next video.